to our third Directors Roundtable. Very appreciative to get all of these great brains together and see all of our colleagues. Let's become a nice way to get some time together and think through the challenges that are upon us today. So this is now our third one we've done this. So Pam in Oregon, you all know Pam, our Executive Director of NIRSA, and then Leah, our current president. The three of us, along with Aaron, have been facilitating these conversations. And really this is a facilitated conversation. Today we have a couple of guests sort of queued up to share some of their expertise and thinking with us. And we're really looking forward to hearing a number of you contribute to the thinking and the conversations. So what we've queued up today to start us off is a little bit of conversation around how, as directors, we're thinking about the sort of short and medium term impacts on our revenue plans, how we're going to be impacted, whether that's through a combination of reduced fees or loss of revenue, or maybe a reduction in some programming, because we know those things are coming to us. I imagine, looking at all of you, that many of you have already been asked to sort of forecast how you're anticipating your campus will be changed, right? And your programs will be changed with any number of these variables. And so while we know that, we also know that for most of us, as a result of that, we're going to have to be innovative and we're going to have to be resourceful as we reboot ourselves here. And we're going to end up looking a little bit differently. So Pam spoke with Jennifer Speer at the University of Texas. As many of you know, they're very, very on the cutting edge of how they generate revenue and the types of monies they bring in and their corporate sponsorships. And so Jen Speer is at University of Texas and is queued up to sort of share a little bit about her thinking and some of their very initial thoughts on how their relationships might change and how they're going to modify and then potentially how they're going to innovate. Please feel free, as Pam said here on the chat, to use the chat. If you want to specifically say something, we'll offer up some moments. You can unmute yourself if you put it in the chat. We can also kind of call you out. If you have the function to raise your hand, we'll try to track that if we can. And please make sure to be respectful. We're not going to politicize anything today. We're just going to try to, as usual, be problem solvers and use each other's wisdom to help us be successful here in the next couple months. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, and away we go.
Good morning now, everybody. Good to see you. Hope you are staying safe and healthy. Yeah, as Alex was mentioning, obviously, we've been very fortunate at UT to have a bunch of different sponsors that work with us. And obviously this pause in what we've been able to offer is affecting them. So some of the things that I would like to contribute to today's conversation, and I'd welcome any comments or questions you have along the way, is one that we're in a sense that we get to bend the rules a little bit. There are no rules. And so we're trying to think boldly during this time and trying to push our boundaries a little bit, especially with our corporate partners. So some things that we've done immediately. One is we've suspended contracts, i.e. we have an Amazon pickup location in our building. As soon as our building got shut down, we suspended that contract. And we worked very closely with our business offices to make sure that our businesses weren't penalized for services they couldn't offer. However, a company like ShakeSmart, which many of y'all might have in your facilities now, they are dependent on college rec facilities. That's their whole business model. So we're working with them to keep them on the forefront of college students' minds by offering the opportunity to do demos on how to make healthy food at home and adding that to some of our virtual offerings. Additionally, we work with Camp Gladiator, a boot camp company, and they are offering a special discount for our UT members, all faculty, staff, students, et cetera, to have opportunities to work at home through their system at a very discounted rate compared to what the community is getting offered. And then we're also doing things like virtual recess. This past year, we introduced Rec Sports Recess, which was a once-a-month pop-up opportunity somewhere outside of our rec facilities. And we've been partnering with Outdoor Voices to bring those monthly. So this month, we're actually doing a live Zoom class that Outdoor Voices is going to do through their platform. They get to do all the technological stuff and the music and all the other concerns that we have. But we're able to brand it, something that we probably wouldn't have done before. We're looking at the assets that we have at this current moment and seeing what we can offer, whereas we might not have been allowed to before because of contracts being so strict. But again, in this moment of time where we're seeing the need for innovation, we're willing to push it a little bit and kind of be bold in some of the decisions we're making. Yesterday, I sat in a call with our new student services team and our corporate marketing partner, IMG, and we talked a lot about virtual orientation opportunities. So the idea of all of our orientations going online this summer, we're going to be doing some pre-recorded sessions. What can we offer to our corporate partners and sponsors to be a part of that? Could they sponsor workouts? Could we put banner ads on, they use Guidebook, the same app that I know NIRSA has used for years for our conference. Can we put banner ads on there? Can we look at the assets that we are developing and think about where we might be able to fit corporate in? And then the other big part of this is, the big discussion has been when we return, things are going to look differently. How do we deliver services to meet the new expectations and the new routines? And so who right now should we be thinking about partnering with? So when we come back, there's an opportunity to take this ball and run with it. If there's a way to get more sponsors, they're not buying right now, obviously, they're not looking at spending a lot of money, but when we come back, what that might look like and who do we want to partner with. One of our big wishes in Texas is HEB, which is a huge grocery chain. They have been noted at their emergency preparedness. There was an awesome article recently. It's one of those like, why don't they run the federal government? Because they're so efficient, they're so good. And so for us, we're thinking right now, what are ways that we can go after them and show that we are innovative in our space, you're innovative in yours, and this is how it could look when the students come back. How do we look at grocery delivery on campus and those types of things? And so I would offer the opportunity as you're brainstorming with your staffs. One of the things that we have kind of told our teams are, you need to be thinking about, our group exercise program has changed forever. There's going to be a virtual component of it moving forward. What does that look like? How do we capitalize on that to be able to serve the students what they want and also be a little bit innovative with some partners? Our memberships might look a little bit differently. What kind of new incentive can we offer, and do we bring a corporate partner in? Things that we probably never would have looked before. Now's an opportunity to kind of bend those rules and see what we can do to also help our bottom line, because I think all of us realize we're in some major financial troubles. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, the bending of the rules, Pam has put a comment in there. Is there anybody else out there who's been thinking a little bit like, I did it this way. I've been given permission to think outside the box. I think Pam had talked to the yesterday, Marc Iturriaga, one of our lovely Canadian colleagues. I know you guys had a little conversation yesterday, and you've been thinking a little bit differently about how to bring people together in this time. Is there anything else that you've been thinking about, maybe?
Sure, thanks, Alex. So, some institutions are lucky to have things like corporate sponsors. In Canada, we do not have many institutions with that benefit. And so I think one of the things I'd like to challenge everyone in this arena about the idea that we're going to put a lot of resources and time into trying to get back to normal. And I think right now normal is gone, and what's going to happen after this is going to look completely different. And I fear that if we put all of our resources and time into trying to get back the participants that we lost, we're going to spend a lot of energy, a lot of resources, and we may not even achieve that. And I know many institutions and rec centers have been struggling prior to the pandemic to get new participants, to find new ways of doing things. And so the challenge and what I've been reflecting on is this idea that you know, when we look at factors of success, we've been really measuring success. When you say, well, you know, how do you show success? And that is, you know, well, how much of our facility space is filled, and what's our program registrations? And the challenge I have with that is that it doesn't really reflect on the people aspect and really our whys. When we talk about our why, usually it's about more students, more active, more often, whatever, you know, iteration of that phrase. And, you know, when we think about, well, we have to put virtual fitness classes. And so then we're going to start putting a lot of resources into filming and editing equipment and things like that. I would almost encourage everyone to take a pause at this stage. I understand everyone needs to get back to, well, how am I paying staff? Like understanding the priorities during this crisis. But there's going to be hopefully that time where we can come back together and really think about refocusing on the people. And so what I've been thinking about, you know, for over a year and talking to a lot of different leaders and colleagues, is this idea that sport and rec caters to those embedded in the sport and rec culture for the most part. And we keep wondering why we're not getting more participants. And I would say that because the way we do business is geared towards sport and rec. And so if we focus on a new lens of what I've termed belonging, which is inviting, welcoming, and included, I think we can start doing more innovation with the way we provide those programs. So I can use intramurals as an example. And I see one of my colleagues, Chad Van Dyke from Mount Royal University, he's got a really cool story about pickleball that maybe he'd like to share. But the idea is that, you know, we program intramurals for the most part for sports. And when we program it, we're thinking, well, I'm programming for basketball players. When we shift that lens to, I'm programming this for people who are happening to play basketball, the way we program changes completely, the way we engage, the way we market, because people playing basketball don't all necessarily have the same language, the same culture surrounding basketball, the same rules and understanding. And so we need to change our lens and the way we staff and the way we teach rules and the way we engage the participants. And so that's kind of that shift on the lens. So then when we program, we go, okay, well, we got to have a league of X amount of games. We have to have playoffs. We have to have all these we have to have because of the culture of intramurals that we're in. And I'm an intramural guy, did it for 15 years. But when we start looking at how do we provide programming for people playing basketball, that doesn't necessarily mean a league or in a league. And so when you start putting those energies into something, maybe that's an organized drop-in where, you know, you open up the gym for several hours, you have staff that are there to make people feel invited and welcome. They're helping to self-organize, but allowing the freedom of the participants to play when they want, how they want, with some sort of semi-organized factor. Then we change that whole structure, but we're still meeting that goal of getting more students more active more often. And so that's just one example of saying, taking that time to really slow down and really think about what are we actually trying to do. Same thing with fitness equipment in our facilities. We often look at, well, we have to buy high-end equipment because that's what's going to attract the students. That's, you know, that's a recruiting method. It makes us look good. But I see a lot of students with their own phones and their own iPads. And so we're spending money on treadmills and things with cable and all these things, when who is that attracting and recruiting? And, you know, that might be the high-end fitness user, but there's a lot of our students who have never entered a fitness center ever until they've reached university and seen that opportunity. And so if we start thinking, well, how are we making these individuals feel like they welcome and are invited and they are included in what we're trying to do? And that goes all the way from staffing to our policies to our payment. Maybe now's the time not to generate funds. Maybe it's the time to look back, especially if you don't have that ability, but to look back and say, okay, maybe we're spending money and resources on the things that really don't matter because it's not bringing more students more active more often. All it's doing is actually catering to that sport and rec culture. The last argument I would have with that, I know at the institutions I've been a part at, I never worried whether a student went somewhere else for their recreation activity. I never felt in competition because, again, our goal was for them to be active. They found that somewhere else. They found that virtually free online. I don't feel like I need to compete with them and try, well, we got to provide something. No, they found it. So we really should be looking at those students and individuals that haven't found that niche or don't have that capability, because we've made those students who are already in sport, rec, and culture feel like they belong because we're catering to their needs. And I'm not saying stop doing that, because that's extremely important. It's about changing that lens to people so that now we're focusing on them and how do we get more of those participants into our facilities. And that's probably going to mean a change in programming. It's going to mean a lot more listening to those students and individuals about what's meaningful to them, how they feel when they come into our centers. Because that's one thing I feel we never assessed, is how do the people feel in our programs and our facilities.
Thanks, Marc. Wow, it's a reframe. You know, we've had a couple of comments on the side here, in talking about both of Jen's statements and your statements, right? Jan is talking about rethinking memberships. Leslie talking about, you know, what is that sense of belonging and how that's been a long-term goal. I'm wondering, I'm gonna maybe turn over to my co-facilitator, Leah, to talk, to maybe bounce off of that, because Marc, I definitely appreciate the reframe. You and I go back a long ways, and I obviously resonate quite strongly with that lens. And in my conversation with Leah earlier this morning already, how do we balance that with some of the realities that I think Leah might share? And then maybe collectively we can talk about both the innovative part that Jennifer talked about and maybe some of the reframing with, I think, how Leah can share some of the challenges that she's seen and the new normal for her.
Great, thanks, Alex. Good morning, everybody. So what we're at a point now where we actually have calculated to where we are going to be and financially what the impact is. And I'm sure you're all creating scenarios based on when you might reopen. If you are revenue generating during the summer as the semesters end, we have done that. We also had a reduction in student fee that happened as well. Not as drastic as the University of Oregon, but still very significant. So what we're looking at is, like, as Marc was talking about, how do we shift that lens instead of just looking at what do we do to just bring it back to where we were, but how do we change the lens? How do we pivot that? And so we have been looking at how we could work with eCampus, other populations that may not have been participating or in our space. And from there, with the reality of currently we're over 1 million, we'll be over 1 million short on July 1. So that's a pretty short window to move in. And we don't want to get to the point where we have to reduce FTE, because it's going to be really hard to recover from that. So what can we do in the meantime, taking Jen's concepts of how do we come back with partners that may not be ready now because they're also having the same financial impact, but how do we build those relationships now with those partners to come back in a way how Marc described it, like our group exercises changed forever. So what does that look like? And then how do we reduce the access barrier to students that may not be joining us? Because often we look at that, and it's also part of the changing demographic that's already started to happen on our campuses. So a lot of first-gen students, a lot of Pell-eligible students, and a lot of students of color. And if you think about the students coming out of high school right now that have already applied and been accepted to your institution, they also have had a very, very different experience as they finish high school. So it's not just our students right now that are working remotely in a remote classroom with instructors that aren't trained to teach remotely. So they are having a very different education experience. How can we prepare those students that are already with us to come back and have a different experience than just saying, let's just plug you back into intramurals? And what about those students coming out of high school who haven't experienced, may not have had a totally different experience as they come to us? So putting those two things together with what Jen was talking about, and I really appreciate Marc's lens. It's the pivot with purpose, and how do we help our staff come back to that? So I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
I'm just going to let for a little silence. Does anybody want to make a comment on that? I mean, I'm watching some of the comments. Marc Ritter's talking about balancing our memberships with private companies and how do we do that. I just want to offer it up. I don't see everybody, but if anybody wants to make a comment, please feel free. Otherwise, I got a couple people.
Hey, Alex. Hey, good to see you. I got a couple things that I think are really valuable to exactly what you're saying there. Marc brought up some good points about obviously stopping and slowing down and obviously focusing on what the people want, what they're listening. Listen to your people. Where I'm at now, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by some very influential people in the business and tech world. Obviously, you guys know Mark Zuckerberg, but I think a very important one that is Sheryl Sandberg. We just recently had a chance to listen to her in a fireside chat that she offers. And the fireside chat was about resilience during times of change. And one of the things she brought up is that basically resilience is not a fixed amount in us, right? It's a muscle, right? And we need to build it. We need to build it by helping each other and basically having a shared hope. And so kind of thinking of that message, we started thinking about how we can be proactive in how our approach is in communicating and actually reaching out to our participants in that kind of people first mentality. Other parts of that is like, if you think about just kind of the stages of what everyone's going through right now, there's this, everyone, if you think about it, there's a stage of basically post-traumatic trauma, so to say, post-traumatic, there's now another theory of obviously post-traumatic growth. And the theory behind that is obviously you go through trauma, some sort of major situation, like we all are, and then something in your life gets inherently better, right? Something gets better from within this that usually comes from finding appreciation in things that we probably didn't appreciate before. And so it's kind of in all of us to try to find those moments of joy. And that's kind of what we positioned ourselves as in our work and all of our team. So what we think about is like, how can we have these connections with our team in the offerings that we currently have that we've now pivoted to do either virtually. And some of those things are, just maybe it means that after some of our online classes that we're offering right now, that our instructor is encouraged to stay on after to try to call out individuals one by one and say, hello, good to see you. How are you doing? Just finding those moments of connection that allows them to feel like they're getting back to what they used to be and what they used to love when they came to our facilities, when they came to our sites. That's what they're looking for. I mean, if you think about it too, honestly, if you think about it, like the names of some of these emotions that our people are going through are grief and loneliness, right? So there's a sense of loss that many have had, and it's a sense of the loss of the world as they knew it, right? So how do we bring them back to that? And we've been trying to find different ways to connect them back in this virtual sense, right? Show them that they're literally at the same facility, having the same classes that they really enjoyed before, in a format that obviously gives them a connection. And that's kind of the things that have been successful for us recently. And so that's something I think is valuable. The other part of it too was really nice is that we also try to find ways to connect in a format that allows people to think of the joy. Like basically you've heard of like FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. Well, we try to figure out the things of JOMO, right? The joy of missing out. We think about it now as like, we don't have to sit in traffic right now. So we always say, some of the instructors are talking to the participants and they're like, glad to be at home, right? Not having to worry and sit in traffic, right? It's great, kind of thing. Just finding moments where they can connect and have a moment of joy has started to find impact points that has brought our participants back to the table and knowing that they're enjoying it. So.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, I was going to comment off of that, Adam. So I really appreciate the sense of belonging and, trying to find the joy in that. And I want to tag back to a comment Leslie had put in here about sense of belonging is the number one purpose for what we do. And I think that is something we can bring that is different than some of the corporate sides for fitness and like the corporate companies. And I know Mark had commented, like, how do you balance, Marc Ritter, how do you balance that with community versus fitness corporations? And I think as we show that our students are leading their peers, and we have the student development piece, but as well as the part of a community and creating community in what we do. I think in the first webinar we did on March 16th, I said, take a look to what gaming does, right? Because they create a sense of community online that people feel very connected to. So how do we have our students start to feel that and be included in that? And how do we teach our staff or pivot our staff to that? So I see a question came up here about how are others thinking about leading your staff and students through this new normal? So I think taking what Adam was talking about, Mark, through a new lens, and then, you know, as Jen said, how do we leverage that in with sponsors to want to create that for our students? What is it like on your campus to lead into this new normal? So maybe if there's some people from different parts of the country, because on the West Coast, we've been experiencing this maybe before some other parts of the country have. And so Alex and I have probably had the opportunity with our peers on the West Coast to talk more about what's happening in other parts of the country. So I see Mike Warren on the call. I think I saw a few people over towards the East Coast. So jump in and say how your staff, how you're looking at possibly bringing your staff into this new normal. You're on mute, Mike.
Oh, thank you. So it's been an adventure, and I guess, you know, we had some conversation. I've talked to a couple other colleagues. You know, it's interesting about leadership, and with me being a relatively new director, you know, we've had a lot of conversations where there's really time to pause and reflect and look at what we're doing, and then there's times as leaders where we really have to just step up, and we lead in an unknown, but we lead with, you know, a little bit of calm, but knowing that we're going to support our staff through this. And so it's been interesting. I'm not a touchy-feely type of leadership guy where I'm asking all the different questions about, you know, I care about families and such, but you know, we have a relationship that we're moving forward, but I've had to change. I've had to redirect and first start with, how are you doing? How's your family doing? You know, I talk to our staff about, hey, I love seeing your kids and I love seeing the dogs. Like, don't worry about it. That's in the video. So I've had to change my leadership a little bit to understand people first as far as family, and then work comes second. But at the same time, we have a work family we're supporting. So we're trying to figure out how do we engage our students and our student employees. So I was really proud of our staff. Some of them, you know, have automated some of their communication where they're texting 10 to 20 different staff members every morning, and they have them on a rotation basis. As we talk about finances and some of our membership attrition, we've actually encouraged all of our staff to start emailing some of our members. Everybody has members they know, right? You've got John that's came into your building for the last 20 years, and you know, a group fitness participant that comes to all your classes, and the response has been unbelievable. Not for just the member, but also our professional staff. We have so many extroverts that we call it kind of filling up their cup. They've been filling it up by connecting with members to say, how are you doing in this time of crisis? Have you looked at our virtual programming? Have you participated in it? And then the relationship they're creating, whether it's through email, and some have even done just phone calls. So our members are getting connected to, and I think our staff enjoys it. But for me, it's been just a big increase in communication. I talked about a little bit about using some project management software to connect us as a staff. Some teams are using Slack, some Microsoft Teams. We used Basecamp. It's relatively inexpensive software, and how we've driven communication through that. So we're posting regular updates on COVID on campus into that, so they have one place to look for resources. They're not flooding their email boxes every time, because it could be every 2 to 3 hours something changes. So I think that's been some of the ways I've tried to step up my leadership, is to adapt and change and really listen. But I'm also one that I'm going to move forward. I'm going to use this this challenge as ways to create opportunity. And I love hearing some of the comments, you know, from Jennifer about finding the opportunity and the openings for business. So our virtual programming has been a conversation about this should support us moving forward. I hope it's always a complement. It is not just going to be we're rolling out virtual program to say we're rolling out virtual programs. No, there has to be a means to the end. And I hope that through this we'll continue to share our resources and kind of continue to move on together.
Great, thanks, Mike. Anybody on the East Coast or Southeast that wants to also share perhaps how you're working with your staff, kind of looking at how you're going to continue to innovate and create?
Hey, this is Lashica. I'm down at Columbus State in Georgia, not Ohio. I always have to make sure I say that. One of the things that we're doing with, what I'm doing with my staff is there's a lot of content out there for fitness. So we wanted to make sure we didn't lose some of our other program areas. So aquatics, we're doing like dry land drills, videos, showcasing those. Like we came up with a weekly schedule. So on Mondays, you can tune in and see how to stay active for our swimmers, doing some dry land drills. For our outdoor ventures, we're doing virtual tours to different sites. And then for our rock wall, I have a student who is creating videos on like the proper way to do a figure 8 knot, and each week the skill changes so that we're still trying to engage our rock wall community. And for intramurals and clubs, we're doing the social gaming with Fortnite and things like that, because we don't have esports under Campus Rec, it's under athletics. So taking a different lens with that. And so that's kind of what we're doing. As far as my pro staff, we're doing weekly Zooms. I'm doing midweek check-ins. We created house parties, so we're playing games, just trying to keep that social component going, that interaction, and then just me checking in with them as much as I can.
Great, thanks. Anybody at a smaller school want to share what it's like with a smaller staff, whether it's like yourself and a couple other people? What has that been like?
I see
Deirdre, do you want to?
Yeah, there's some people.
Or Deirdre, do you want to share that?
Deirdre,
I'm coming. Hi, everyone. I'm at Deirdre Reich. I'm at Wingate University in North Carolina. We are a small residential college. We have roughly 3,500 students. And I have 2 full-time staff other than myself and 2 graduate assistants. One graduate assistant who is graduating, and his job searches have all dried up because hiring has dried up. So that's a challenge for him. We are trying to do some of the things that you all discussed, offering some online classes, some esports opportunities. We're currently going through an interview process for next fall. And so we have students on that are like kind of our hiring committee that will be conducting interviews similar to what we're doing right now via Zoom. We were just told today that all summer classes will be online. So I don't even know when we're going to open our facility. If the classes are online, that means there are a very small amount of people on campus. And then the other thing is, you know, with my staff, they're just trying to have, the ones that are work more closely with students, I'm a little bit removed, but they have open office hours. So they keep, you know, they open up Zoom and people can join whenever, and they just kind of, more or less just kind of shoot the breeze, you know, and have some fun with each other and kind of keep that connection going. I also don't, you know, like, unlike some of you, I don't have to generate revenue. We have a very captive audience in that everybody lives on campus, or most people do. So I don't see our programs and services changing a whole lot. If anything, we might be able to enhance some things, but I don't see it changing a whole lot when we do resume classes on campus. We just keep hearing that students are longing to get together and be together, and, you know, spend time together. Our McGee Center is kind of like the university community center, really. It's the place where people gather and connect, have fun. So, so yeah, that's kind of perspective from a small school.
Great, thank you.
This is Monica.
go ahead.
Verity. Hi.
Yeah.
I'm the director at Wellesley College. It's outside of Boston, and we have about 2,400 students, and it's an all-women's institution. So it's interesting about hearing everyone talk about pivoting program and thinking creatively. And I've been at Wellesley now for 7 years, and I've had to do everything creatively because women are very relational, and they participate in different things. So we predominantly program towards students, and through this, we report to the provost or academic institution. We report through academics. And they've opened it up to faculty staff programming, and I am the only full-time staff in rec. I have a 0.75 person who we just hired this year. So it's kind of been a one-person operation and trying to navigate these waters, but our programming has really been fantastic because the students are just looking to find community, to find belonging, even if it's new with our, I mean, I've been doing live fitness classes to try to get them involved. So even though it's challenging, people are engaging in a more active way than in the past, just because they don't know what else to do. And we also have students from all over the world that are just trying to find their normal now. So everything everyone's been saying, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And just recognizing that they're showing up, and that's important.
Thanks for sharing. I want to just kind of jump back in the chat a little bit. I kind of made a note of this. Jennifer Luna had mentioned in the UC system, they have a measure of sense of belonging that they use as part of their programming to align outcomes. Jennifer, are you comfortable to talk a little bit about what you're doing to measure that sense of belonging, and have you had the conversation about how you're measuring that once you move things online, or is that a good topic for you to bring forward?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm part of the California State University system. And so within the 23 campuses, our chancellor has identified sense of belonging as one of the graduation initiatives for all CSUs. And at Cal State East Bay, I've been part of a strategic planning process that involves academic affairs as well as student affairs. I report to the AVP of Student Support Services. My campus is a little unique where I also supervise our basic needs initiative, so the food pantry and emergency award assistance. And then I also supervise part of our student health and counseling services, specifically our health educators and our peer health educators that are doing education about alcohol, nutrition, sexual health, self-care. And so the way that we really approach recreation and wellness is from a holistic perspective. And although we do have a fitness and sports focus, we really move beyond that. And so from our first touch with students, we try to create a sense of belonging through letting them know that we don't prescribe what recreation or wellness looks like on our campus. And that happens at orientation. And then as people are participating in our different programs and services, that's where our assessment piece comes in. So our measurement tools have been aligned with what our Office of Diversity is measuring sense of belonging. And although it includes some self-reflection, like how does your participation in X, like group fitness, intramural sports, this special event, how does that contribute to your sense of the campus? We also really look at an environmental perspective. So how are we as campus rec and wellness creating channels for inclusion? How are we trying to remove barriers for accessibility? But doing it more intentionally in alignment with other departments, and then asking specific questions of the students who belong with those affinity groups to either develop our language and also participate in our programs. And so some of our assessment right now, and this is really only the first year, half of a year, because we've been home for a while and trying to figure out what this looks like, but it's part of our 5-year strategic plan. And so we don't have any rich data right now, but we are trying to figure out how does this look like in our virtual world? We haven't had the opportunity to get too many programs up and running, but we are scrambling to figure that out because we just got permission to have most of our staff work from home. So I don't have any giant revelations at this point, but we are building a foundation, and we're feeling really strong about it because we have the support of our vice president.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jennifer. We got a chance to meet earlier this year. You are doing some really amazing work there, and that lens is a great lens for us to keep thinking about. You know, and watching the chat here, there's been a lot of conversation around a lot of summer session online, right? So we know that there's going to be some changes to our worlds and our budgets because students aren't going to be there. I think also, you know, from Mark's point here and Jennifer's point here, this conversation around belonging and how after we all get done with this coronavirus, how are we in collegiate rec going to help us ramp that back up? I think, you know, we've certainly all been able to modify, but is it really going to be the new normal? And then another thing I'd love to hear people think about is early on, as I was trying to justify our work and how important our work is, the role of health and the role of, sadly with the coronavirus, right, we know that a lot of it has to do with underlying conditions. So in some ways, to me, it really highlighted the value of our work and the value of just being well people. There's a lot of people doing wellness work, but literally the physical manifestation of good health is important. And so I see a couple people on here. Obviously, George Brown, you're on here. James Wilkening at Central Florida. Wondering if a couple people might be willing to talk a little bit about how they're thinking about how collegiate recreation can sort of lead in the next 2 or 3 months in our divisions and our departments, how we can advocate for the work we do as we sort of work through these budget challenges and the stories that we need to be telling. Is there a new reframe? Is it the same story? Do we position ourselves well because of the well-being? You know, those are a couple people. I don't know if anybody else is willing to think about that a little bit, how you're beginning to tell your story.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and good to see so many of y'all on the call. It's really heartwarming to see 110 plus people out there sort of sharing and some of the great work. I think some of this around belonging is really pivotal and key. I would say the new normal for health and well-being is really kind of an accentuation of what was already happening before the pandemic. I think this is where we were moving a lot of things, and now I think we accelerate that. The one piece of advice that's not going to be a surprise to anyone, I think, is now more than ever, the sense of collaboration with your campus health and well-being partners needs to be accentuated. And I think that needs to be a deeper exploration of who those partners are. Some of our campuses are fortunate enough to have really good care programs, good victim advocacy. I think displacement of underrepresented and marginalized students is going to be accentuated. The pandemic is already showing evidence of how it's discriminating in some respects to those particular populations. First-gen students will need to be recognized in that. So I think if you have units, particularly your health center, your counseling center, you know, we were already hearing the mental health mantra, and I think that's now times 10. But I do think I'm very heartened by the fact that collegiate recreation, our departments and programs are well heeled to do this. I mean, we were already aware of the need. Now I think, again, going back to what was said at the beginning of the hour with what Marc was sharing and, you know, Jen and what UT are doing with corporates and so much of you guys just looking at joy and what's missing out. I love that, Adam. I mean, I think these are all the things that somehow we need to coordinate and really own. And I don't say own in the sense of campus rec proprietarily, but more so around the idea of owning them with your campus partners. I think universities in the lean and mean reality post-COVID are going to be looking at efficiencies. I was going back and forth with a colleague here on the chat privately. Minnesota's going to lose about $4 million campus rec. We're going to lose it. And between self-generated and student fee refunds. So the new normal for us is going to be the relevance of health and well-being and taking care of whether it's a 15% or 20% reduction in enrollment, whoever those people are, they're incredibly important. And I think that we are well positioned in this integrated wellness sort of come to being post-COVID and the new different normal. I'm very, very heartened by where we're positioned in this. I realize it's uncharted waters, but that's okay. We're pretty good at that. So, you know, I'm very encouraged by the things very specific on the call today, but collaborating with partners, particularly health and well-being facing partners, in my opinion, has never been more important.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to just open it up to see if anybody else has been thinking about that or what they might be talking about on their campus. I see you leaning in, Haley.
Yes, I did my nice little, yes, I'm from a really, really small campus. We have about 1,500 students, and that's on a good semester. And we are in a community of only about 5,000 people. So our staffing is pretty limited, but one of the things that I've been doing a lot of is working with our insurance provider and talking about what sort of things can we be offering our employees, as well as kind of gearing that towards students. I know students have different insurance providers, that sort of thing, but kind of utilizing those resources there. We have an employee wellness program that I started, and I've been using that a lot to help those students continue to be engaged, get proper education on this whole pandemic, and kind of leading that way of what is already there, but just figuring out a way to put it all together with our insurance provider, our health, our student health, and then our mental health as well, and working a lot with HR, just trying to put it all together, making an easy platform, easy access for students and employees to use. So that's kind of how we've been, our rec department has kind of been leaning in and leading our employees and students through thinking about what can I do to stay healthy, and what happens if I do get it. So we're not a hot spot at all. We're in Wyoming, very rural. So
yeah.
we're pretty healthy so far, but it's still pretty scary. And I'm thinking all of you guys who are in hot spots, and hope you guys are all healthy and safe.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Hey, I see Tim Mertz on the call, and I'm wondering, Tim, if you can hear me, and if I can't see your photo, but I know you sort of have a nice intersection here that's unique around the work that you're doing, some work with community folks, and maybe you've been thinking about this a little bit.
Hey, Alec, thanks for the.
Oh, great.
Can you just reframe the question one more time? I was focused on turning my video on.
Yeah, that's fine. I just know that you've been, you have this interesting intersection in the work that you do, and that you've been thinking about. And I'm just wondering what you're seeing sort of strategically, and how you're approaching some of these things around well-being and health promotion, and talking about with your bosses and your colleagues about how we can end up successful here. What are you seeing?
Maybe just a couple thoughts, and I don't know if it's right on target with what you're asking, but the first couple things that come to mind, Alec, are, and what I've been telling a lot of our teams is right now we have this opportunity. It ties back a little bit into what Mike Warren said. There is an opportunity here, and we have to view this as opportunistic. And one of the things that I've shared with the staff is that we have an opportunity to build community. It's a whole new community. It's a virtual community. And it's a new way to engage. It's a new way to show who we are and what we offer. And I just think that right now, more than ever, it's building a virtual community. And then we will at some point be able to transition that virtual community back into the place. But I think we still want to hold on to that virtual community, because we'll be able to run both in tandem when the doors finally open back up. And when you think about Peloton, they're not successful because of their bike, they're successful because of their community. And if you think about CrossFit, it's not the name or the W or the WOD, it's the community. And so I just think we need to focus on that piece. And then the second piece is just in terms of preparing our teams. I just had this discussion the other day. We had to close our facilities so fast I mean, Alex, I think, what, did you do it in 45 minutes is what I saw, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we closed so fast that we never had the chance to train our staff or to prepare them for how to protect themselves in the COVID environment. And so I'm wondering, what can we learn from the grocery industry or from the restaurant industry to prepare our staff for when we return? Because when the doors open, COVID's not going to be gone from the country. It's just going to be diminished. And I think people are going to be hyper aware of their environments. They're going to be a little reluctant. And I think that applies to our staff. And so is there going to be an expectation for them to have gloves or to have masks or to put sneeze guards up in front of registers? I was at Dunkin' Donuts the other day, and the general manager there put one of his 6-foot tables in front of the register so that customers could not get in front of his staff any closer than 6 feet. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant move out of that general manager. And so when you talk about health and wellness, I think we need to think about our staff and our people and when they come back, and what's the environment going to be like for them, and are they going to feel safe?
Yeah, that's great, Tim. And I think that's, I bet we've all been thinking similarly in terms of what is out there in these different environments, right, that we can learn from. I love that story about the grocery stores. Jen, you were talking about that earlier at the very beginning to link us back, right? Like what other industries can we learn from? Because there's people that are going through this right now. Last week, people were already sort of thinking about, are we ready? What's the conversation like when we reopen? And I'm not sure, Pam, and I'm going to turn this back to Pam and Leah here to sort of bring us home. How many, are we going to keep doing these every week? When will we be ready to dive deeper into that conversation, Tim? And what can we learn from these folks sort of outside of our realm? That's one of the reasons I was excited to have Adam here, because he, is at Facebook, which has a different lens. Maybe we need to be thinking about another industry to invite in to sort of share with us their learning about being open. And the food industry seems to be a really good one that we might want to think about. So I'm gonna turn this back over to Pam. She's remained kind of quiet today. She's been watching all the chat, but she's obviously one of our best thinkers. So Pam, back to you.
Yeah, so, I'm getting lots of feedback from members and leaders in the space around what you're thinking about, what you're talking about, what you'd like to learn more about from your colleagues and from other places. And at least right now, and we know this is changing quickly, but for right now, the two strongest things I'm hearing is more thought and even some survey work around revenue streams. How are you dealing with your fees? What are you doing with refund policies? And the conversation has shifted from the initial considerations you were all making the last couple weeks of March in the immediacy of things, now more shifting to long-term. How's your overall spring budget been impacted? How is your summer budget going to be impacted? How are you thinking about fall? We saw some of that in the chat here today. So many of you received and responded to the quick survey we did last week around just kind of an overview of the state of campus recreation. The plan right now is to do the next survey and dive more into the fee budget revenue impacts and how you're addressing some of those. Again, it'll be quick, maybe 10, 12 questions, quick turnaround, see what's going on right now so that all of you can be aware of the other things that people are considering. The other strong topic I'm hearing is around reopening, right? And again, we heard that again today. I'm also getting that feedback in between these meetings about how do we think about reopening, everything from, operations to safety, like Tim mentioned, to how opening the rec center in relation to other parts of campus is going to work, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that'll be another area we dive more into, either through roundtables, maybe one focus specifically on that, maybe some survey work at some point to get a lay of the land about how people are thinking about reopening.
Well,
I have really appreciated the idea, so please continue to email me with your thoughts. I'll also tell you that that ACE, the American Council on Education, announced earlier this week, I believe, that they're going to start surveying college presidents monthly. and just to continue to get the lay of the land, what are college presidents thinking about, and then they'll share that information out. I believe that'll be widely available. It won't be restricted. We do, through Erin O'Sullivan's great work, have a relationship with one of the assessment people at ACE, and so she's invited us to suggest things that might need to go in the president's survey. Now, obviously, they get the final call on that. This is an opportunity for influence, though. So we'll be looking at that, listening to campus recreation, and if we feel like there's something to influence there that would be helpful to all of you, we'll certainly use that channel.
I was going to add to Pam that also another topic I think I saw a little bit is how do we get our staff to be innovative? Well, not that they're not innovative, but how do we have them think forward to that we're not just doing this temporarily, that we are going to be actually operating differently and being innovative and creative in that space, and helping them not to just go back to the comfortable space, as Marc talked about intramural sports is about creating a league and schedule and all that. How do we help those people that have maybe done that for a long time in their career, or young professionals, to actually, you know, do that pivot and start to actually engage with the innovation? So that may be something from a director's point of view too that we want to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I just told the headquarters staff this the other day, that, you know, we've stopped doing a lot of things, right, in favor of doing some new things in this time and some appropriate different things in this time. And I said, you know, we're not necessarily going to pick everything back up again, right? We're going to make intentional decisions about what we restart and what we don't restart, because it is a new normal. And I imagine you all are at least thinking, if not having those same conversations with your staff. And there's probably some collective wisdom here around what are the kinds of things that we've done for a long time, that again, this is an opportunity to say, you know what, it's time to sunset that. It's time to graduate that program. We're going to focus on some new and different things, because there's a lot of wonderful stuff coming out of this pandemic that we want to keep doing.
Thanks, Pam. Leah? Yeah.
I was just gonna say there's a few comments about smaller schools and private versus public, trying to kind of we can maybe create some chat rooms that are smaller and not necessarily have to do a full, but we could get you together in those spaces too. So go ahead, Alex.
I was gonna say, I think at first I just want to say thanks everybody for your engagement and listening. And I do agree. I think as we move forward, you know, those of us sort of facilitating this I think will benefit from some breaking up into some smaller conversations, perhaps moving forward, and using some of the Zoom features on that. I was reading stuff, you know, the small schools, I think the challenges are going to be different than the big state schools. The fee-driven folks that are often state schools will be different than the private schools that, you know, have a different budget. So I think those are some areas we might want to investigate. And then this conversation about what I would say there's two more to think about is the budget implications, but really maybe hearing how some people are doing it, right? What sort of assumptions are people who are making these budgets thinking about? What are we talking about? What's the rate of return that people are coming back? Do they come back one day, everybody, or do they come back slowly? So there's a lot more to continue on this. So I just want to say thanks, everybody, once again, for your engagement and for your insights and for being willing to share what's happening on your campus. And again, always grateful for our NIRSA colleagues. Leah, do you have any final words for us, Madam President?
Thanks. Just take care, everybody. And I really appreciate all the thoughts and the insight. The chat is just so valuable. Direct your colleagues into that chat so that they can also contribute to the conversation as we move forward. It's all about us being a NIRSA family. So let's get through this together, because we've got this.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Good luck. Stay healthy.